I have been curious to see Pete Hegseth's birth chart since the first time I heard him speak, which was around the time he was nominated for US Secretary of Defense. I can't remember his exact words, but he has repeated the same sentiment many times since, and it echoes a tattoo that he has on his arm of the Latin phrase Deus vult. Now, Deus vult means God wills it. So, watching him embed that mindset and perspective into his role as basically the person in charge of the world's largest and arguably most powerful military really made me think about two things. Number one, whether the administration has an astrologer on payroll, and number two, what the stars had to say about Pete Hegseth. All right, so let's have a look at his chart. And I promise you, I did not realize it's actually his birthday today, the day that I'm recording this. I've had it in my mind that I was going to, yeah, do his video was going to be the first one I would film. So that's really interesting. All right, anyways, let's get into it. We don't have to look very hard at his chart to see how it could potentially manifest as someone who believes that they are on a divine mission, or at least believes in a divine mission, has a very strong spiritual foundation, and is very comfortable communicating that story with the rest of the world. So I'm basing that on an opposition with his Gemini sun and his ascendant in Sagittarius. Now, oppositions are typically a push pull energy, and there certainly is that here. But Gemini and Sagittarius actually have a reputation for being the most compatible of the opposing signs. And I think that's because the curiosity of Gemini can fuel the wisdom seeker in Sagittarius, and vice versa. Gemini likes to gather information. So they can be very simpatico. And what makes an opposition between the sun and the ascendant even more interesting is that they occur across the first and seventh houses. The first house is the house of the self, and that's where the ascendant lives. It's how we move through the world. So a Sagittarius is, among many other things, someone for whom faith in the divine would come very naturally for. And the seventh house, which is where Gemini is the house of the other. So that's partnerships, but also traditionally the house of open enemies. And Gemini already has a reputation for being something of a mirror. People call it two-faced, but that's not really what it is. I think it's just that Gemini is always taking in new information and adapting, reevaluating that information. So, and one more thing worth noting very briefly is that Venus is at the very last degree of Gemini. Venus rules partnerships and relationships. And I think with Venus sitting right there in the seventh house energy, it amplifies that whole theme. So this is someone for whom the choice of allies, friends, and partners carries real weight. So hopefully he chooses wisely. And neither of these two planets are particularly fixed. Um, they're both adaptable signs. They both, like to change a lot. So it's very interesting to me to see these two signs and to see it in somebody who thus far has been so steadfast in his loyalty, et cetera, which can be a Sagittarius trait a little bit, like for sure, and that's an ascendant thing. He also has his Neptune there, which could be played. Well, I'm not even going to touch that one in this little video. That's a whole other video. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. These two signs are known for shifting their ideas, and right now we have not seen that. But I will say the potential is there for that. Okay, so let's move on to the moon, which is in the final degrees of Pisces. So we have a sun ascendant opposition and then the moon in Pisces. Now, Pisces does not really harmonize well with Sagittarius or Gemini, so this placement is just basically increasing or kind of amplifying the tension of the opposition. It isn't in a direct square, but it deals in emotion, and it doesn't deal particularly well with the cerebral, expansive, idea-driven Gemini-Sagittarius axis. It does love being in Pisces though. So it's emotional, intuitive, and it goes deep, deep, deep into Pisces. It's super happy there. And this emotional placement is kind of anchoring the other two. So I feel like you see that sometimes with Hegseth, like you can see he gets very emotional. And I think that's his Pisces moon. And that's how he's releasing the tension that he's feeling. And his chart suggests that there is a lot of inner turmoil. So the fact that his moon is sitting at the final degrees of Pisces is kind of a big deal because that signifies a culmination point of the Piscean energy. And last year, Saturn and Neptune were basically in conjunction around that point for most of the year. They were actually kind of retrograding, so moving between the last degrees of Pisces and the first degrees of Aries for most of the year. But it really would have activated that emotional basis of his core personality. And it would have been a major life event for him. And I think we can see that just by looking back at what happened. So a Neptune conjunct a natal moon in Pisces, like that would have been sort of like the dream of a dream of a dream. And with Saturn present, it kind of gives the potential for that to take form. And honestly, that's a little bit terrifying just because I feel like my dream of a dream of a dream and Pete Hegseth's dream of a dream of a dream are going to be very, very different things. So that transit and activation probably would have felt to him like a confirmation in his beliefs of Deus Vult. So when he says it's part of God's will, he legitimately believes that. And probably the Neptune Aries conjunction with his moon had a role in solidifying that belief for him. Saturn moves much faster than Neptune. So as it separates from that dreamy, intuitive state, it's going to be really interesting to see whether the vision that's solidified during the conjunction is actually going to manifest. Like whether he's able to harness the Saturn energy and build something real from it. My instinct is sort of telling me that renaming the Department of Defense is a real window into what his vision looks like. Saturn rules bureaucracy, institutions, structures, and one of his first moves is to rename the one he leads. Like that does not feel like just an administrative decision. It feels like so much more than that. And honestly, if that concerns you, take note. Maybe now's the time to call your representative. Like this is not nothing. Under these skies, it is significant. Let's move on to one last placement, the North Node. And this one I really did not want to see. So the North Node is your karmic direction in this lifetime. We move from our South Node, which is where we feel very comfortable, to our North Node, which is where we're being pulled and what we're here to grow into. So Pete Hegseth North Node is in Leo. Now, Leo is the sign of the leader, and it suggests that his karmic destiny, if you will, is to step into power as his authentic self and claim the spotlight as a leader. Literally, it's the last thing I want to see as someone observing the way he wields his power. Is a chart that supports the narrative of a destined leadership, but it exists. It is there in his chart. Thankfully, it's in his 9th house of philosophy as opposed to his 10th house of career. So his influence here may be relegated more to leadership in his ideology and less so for his career. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The North Nodes are shifting. The nodal axis is moving to Leo and Aquarius from Pisces and Virgo. But here's the thing. Leo is going to be the South Node and Aquarius will be the North Node. So that means collectively as a world, we're moving away from Leo energy, away from the singular chosen leader, away from focusing on self and the me, and towards Aquarius, collective, distributed, community-driven power. So leaders who embody the Aquarian energy will rise, and those who don't will fall. Not all of them, obviously, but some. And so Pete Hegseth's natal North Node, the chart says he's moving towards, is going to become the direction the collective is moving away from. As if all of that was not dramatic enough, over the next year, Jupiter, the great benefic, will be transiting Leo, starting at the end of June. So I think we can see him become more confident, and I think he's going to be more in the spotlight. Leo amplifies where you put your energy. So let's say if you put your energy towards conflict, Jupiter's going to grow the conflict. But let's say you're an artist, and if you put your energy into your art, you're going to grow creatively in that realm. And once again, as a whole, society is moving in the opposite direction. So it's going to be very interesting to see how or whether he can adapt to that. We've got one more eclipse on the Pisces Virgo axis after the node shift, but after that, there'll be a noticeable vibe shift that's going to, I think, underpin everything over the next year and a half. So there you have it, a very brief peek at the chart of a soul who is, among many other things, here to navigate inner conflict and step into the spotlight in this moment of time. I firmly believe that we all have free will, and our natal chart is not a blueprint of our destiny, but more like a roadmap written in a code that only our own soul truly understands. So if you need help decoding your map, click the link in my bio for a reading. And if there's anyone else whose chart you want me to look at, let me know in the comments. Until next time.